Now, to try to clarify exactly what the categorical imperative is saying, we really need to talk about three concepts that Kant uses. This concept of a maxim, concept of universal law, and the concept of willing. Okay, and maxim is the first one that we'll turn to. I usually tell a bad joke that Maxim is not a men's in this context is not a men's magazine that people might find in subway stations, but rather maxims are related to motives. And Kant gives this definition, and it's about as difficult to understand as many of his definitions. But he says a maxim is a subjective principle of volition. Awkward way of saying volition is what you do when you act. It's an act of free will, an act of will. Watch me, I raise my hand, act of free will. I turn to the right, I turn to the left, acts of free will. Those are volitions. So Kant claims that whenever a person engages in a real action, genuine action, that is one that's subject to moral appraisal, a moral evaluation, he or she's exercising his or her free will. That is, it's an act of will, an act of volition. But he says in all those cases that we're talking about, the genuine action, that you're acting in accordance with a general principle which is expressing your motive for acting. An example we're going to go through, because we're going to see this is an example that works for Kant, explaining his theory, and it'll also explain the terms we're talking about. Let's take an example. I need money, and the only way I can get the money is by borrowing it. And I'm belly up, I have no money, I have a serious gambling problem, whatever the problem is. I owe monies to loan sharks. I can't raise 2 cents, but the only way I need money very badly, and the only way I can get it is by borrowing it. The loan sharks are going to break my knees. Now, let's say what I do is, and furthermore, it's not just the loan sharks. I'm in debt way over my head. There's no way in the world I could ever pay back the money that I'm going to borrow. But look, I might try to begin getting myself out of trouble by borrowing it from a friend. Okay, and now let's see how what the motive is, what the maxim is in this case. Now, according to Kant, it's a real action. It has a maxim. It's not a mere bodily movement. That is, borrowing money. It's not like, you see me, I have an itch. I'm scratching an itch, not really thinking about it. And the other thing he points out is it's not something that I really have to sit down and deliberate about, think about for a while. But even when I'm just, when you're taking a test, you have a certain motive, we sometimes call these intentions in English. You have a certain motive or intention. You're trying to accomplish something. For instance, your motive in taking the test, even though you're probably not thinking about it, consciously thinking about it, is that you're trying to answer the questions on the test correctly. And another thing to keep in mind is your motive, your maxim, could be inaccurate. Maybe I have this maxim, this motive when I'm borrowing the money, but maybe I've forgotten that I have, a tremendous sum of money in my wallet, or I've hidden it away somewhere else, so that I can have this motive of borrowing it for this false reason, lying when I'm borrowing it, but and I'm doing that even though kind of the condition that leads me to that is not correct. So maxim doesn't necessarily have to be accurate. Final point we should make about maxims is that there's no one-to-one correlation between a certain action and a certain maxim. That is, one action, even from one person, can be done for very different reasons. So think about the motive, the maxim, as expressing the person's reasons for doing it, answering the question, why is this person doing this, doing this thing? So let's go back to the academic honesty question. Both Jim and Joan don't cheat in the example, right? But Jim doesn't cheat because he's concerned about getting caught. So his motive might be what I'm expressing here as M1. When I'm concerned that I'll get caught cheating, I don't cheat. That is his, you might say, modus operandi, or in this case, that's what his maxim is. Joan doesn't cheat, as we pointed out in the example, because it's the right thing to do. So Joan's maxim, even though they're both doing the same action, not cheating on the test, Joan's action, or her maxim for her action is very different, because her maxim is whenever I take an exam, I'm not going to cheat. Okay, so that's her maxim, that's his maxim, and I hope this helps us understand what maxims are in general. As a maxim expresses a motive for acting, it explains why a person acted. Let's say I sat down there and I went to sleep, and it's not just I nodded off, in the middle of in the middle of listening to a lecture or something, or reading a boring book. But I laid down, I got into my pajamas, I got into bed, I laid down and went to sleep. Then the question is, why did I go to sleep? And I was grading papers and I was exhausted. So the maxim, the motive is, when I'm tired like that, I'm going to go to sleep. And we should see that maxims all have a certain form. It's a principle of a certain form, that a maxim starts whenever I am in some kind of state, fill in the blank, comma, I shall or I will do X, Y, or Z.